Welcome back to Andersen Acres. Today we are going to make a bun that is one of my favorites. I know I say that a lot, but this is a bun that I use for hamburger buns, for sandwiches, for all kinds of things, because it actually makes the perfect hamburger bun. These are brioche buns. I am going to be mixing them in my bread maker. That's the dryer. I don't recommend baking a brioche loaf in your bread maker. That's not a good idea, but you can use your bread maker to mix, knead, and do your first rise. That's no problem. Now, brioche are buttery, they're egg rich, and they have a little bit of cornmeal in them just to give them a little bit of texture. So they really are fantastic. So let's get started. The first thing you're going to want is half a cup of butter. Yes, butter, not margarine. Do not substitute margarine. Okay? You have to use butter in this. So, half a cup of butter. Then you're going to want 4 eggs. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, 4 full eggs. I said it was rich in egg. Then you're going to want 2/3 of a cup of milk. I'm using 2% milk. That's ideal for this recipe. No, you can't use water. This recipe does not turn out well unless you have the butter, the milk, and the eggs. You have to have all 3 of those things. Then we're going to do 1½ teaspoons of salt. I'm using Himalayan, but you can use any salt you have on hand. 3 tablespoons of sugar. Yes, it's a slightly sweeter bread. That's one of the reasons it makes such a nice, delicious hamburger bun. You're going to do a full tablespoon of cornmeal. This gives it a nice little texture. And now you're going to do 3 3/4 cup of either all-purpose or bread flour, whatever you normally use. It's a lot of flour for me not to spill, so let's give it a shot. Yay! Got most of it. So that was 3 3/4 cup. Okay, there we go. And then you're going to have 2 teaspoons of bread machine or quick rise yeast. If you're mixing it by hand, you can certainly do a traditional yeast in your warm milk with a little bit of sugar. Let that develop for a few minutes before you proceed to make your dough. So we're going to pop this in the bread maker. No big deal. It'll be ready in about 1.5 hours for my bread maker. Your bread maker may be slightly different, but that's average. So we'll come back and we will shape it in about 1.5 hours, 1 hour and 45 minutes. Sometimes this dough does need a little bit longer to rise. Our dough has finished its first rise and is ready for us to divide and form into buns. It should smell like butter and feel like a marshmallow, like a kind of a slightly sticky marshmallow, the kind of marshmallow that hasn't been coated in sugar yet. So it should have a really good feel, and it should definitely smell of butter. Okay, it should be nice and fluffy, and it should have a really distinct buttery texture as you're running your hands through it. So squish out all that air. That's what we're doing right now, squishing out all that air. You don't want to leave any air bubbles trapped because we just want to kill all those air bubbles. Bubbles. There we go. Air punch down. Out. There we go. You're going to need a flat cookie sheet. We're not going to use a cake pan or anything because we actually don't want the buns to touch the side. So now we're going to divide this into 12. This makes 12 decent sized buns, basically hamburger bun size. So first we're dividing it into 4, which is fantastic. This dough is really easy to handle, and you can feel the cornmeal in it as you're moving it around in your hands, but there's not so much cornmeal that it's super cornmeal-y, but you can still feel it. There we go. So 4 balls, and each of those is going to get divided into 3. So we're just going to divide that into 3 equal pieces. Just like that. This is really easy to do. I use one of these. This makes my life so much easier. Instead of using a knife, just use a metal bowl scraper to just slice right down through them. It makes it much, much easier. I will put a link in the description to one of these because I keep having people ask, where do I get one? I got mine on Amazon. I will put a link to one just so that you can find it easily because I've had people say they have difficulty finding them on Amazon. I don't blame you. sometimes search algorithms are not that much fun. So I'll put a link, promise. All right, so we're just gonna take our dough, find your smoothest side. So in this case, it's this side, and basically turn your dough inside out. You push your fingers inside, form your dough by gathering it at the bottom, kind of give it a twist and a press. Put all that folded nonsense at the bottom on your pan. So we're just gonna move these guys out of the way so you can see me place them on the pan a little bit. Yeah, you don't have to be gentle with your dough. Bread dough you can smack around, you can throw, it doesn't matter. Bread dough's not that tricky. So again, find your nicest side, which in this case is that side, and then everything else you fold inside, kind of give a twist so it all stays together, and then nonsense side down is what my grandma used to say. Okay, nonsense side down, which is the side where you do all your grabbing and twisting and pulling. That side down. So I just finished doing these. Now this is really easy to do. It is a more expensive bread dough just because of the butter and the eggs. So this is not your cheapest option, but it is a delicious one. And I absolutely do recommend this one for hamburger buns. I'm not saying you can't do this with any other bread dough. Of course you can. But this just gives you a richer bread dough and just an easier... It's just easier to impress people if you're looking to impress them, but they're also delicious. These are so buttery, so delicious. Try them at least once. They do cost a little more to make. It's not that much more. I mean, with the extra egg and the butter, and yeah, they're not the cheapest, but that's okay. Sometimes that's okay. Splurge a little sometimes. There we go. So we're just going to make 12 buns. Don't try to make more than that, especially if you're making hamburger buns. They won't rise big enough if you try to make too many. So this recipe really is designed for 12 hamburger buns. Of course, if you're doing something other than a hamburger bun, you can certainly make sure that you make more and they'll just be smaller. But if you're doing hamburger buns, this is what you need. You need about this size, so divide it into 12. There we go. All right, then what we're going to do, they are going to go to rise, but before we do that, we're just going to give them each a press, which I know I don't normally do. I'm just going to press them, but because I am making hamburger buns today, I do want them to spread out a little bit more. So I'm just going to give them a press so that when they do rise out as well as up. There we go. So they're a little bit flatter than you normally see my bread doughs, but that's okay. That's what we want. So we're going to set this aside to rise. You can cover it with a damp tea towel. I'm going to put it in my microwave, whatever works for you. A slightly damp, nicely warmed area is best. So for me, that's my microwave. For you, that might be a damp tea towel on your oven. That's fine. Don't worry about it. So set these aside to rise. It's going to take about an hour, maybe an hour and a half for these to double in size. We'll come back and see how they've done. All right, our buns have risen. Now we are ready to coat them. To coat them, we are going to need 1 egg. Just 1 egg, no big deal. We also need 1 tablespoon of water. Put that in with the egg. Take your basting brush and just smash up that egg yolk. Give it a little bit of a whisk. I use my basting brush to do this because it doesn't dirty as many dishes. There's no reason to use a little whisk when the end of my basting brush does the same job. Okay, now we're going to take that and just brush that quickly on our buns. Now you want to preheat your oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. These are going to go in the oven when we're finished covering them. They'll go in the oven for 25 to 30 minutes. 25 minutes is probably sufficient, but you want them to have a nice brown color. So check them at 25, but it's okay to leave them for 30. There you go. You won't use all of your egg wash, and that's okay. There we are. So once you're done coating them, we're going to cover the tops in a little bit of sea salt. You can use a different salt if you like, but of course sea salt does work the best. And all you want to do is put a little bit on. You can double the amount I do if you want. You definitely don't need to. So I just take this, okay? You don't need a ton. You don't need super salty buns. Nobody needs that. This just gives your topping a nice crunch, a nice flavor, and it just enhances your brioche buns. So we're going to pop that in the oven at 375 degrees Fahrenheit for about 25 to 30 minutes. We'll be back. And there you have it, buttery brioche buns for the whole family. I hope you've enjoyed making these with us today. Remember that if you're using them as hamburger buns, you want to let them cool completely before slicing. Give these a try in your own kitchen. You won't be disappointed. See you tomorrow.